I'm Beck and I just finished my reread of The Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I am excited to bring to you all of the things that I wrote down, the different quotes, the best moments of this book. If you're a Brandon Sanderson fan, consider subscribing because I am putting out more content for the Stormlight Archive before The Knights of Wind and Truth comes out. But without further ado, let's get into my best moments. The first one is in a flashback from Yasna and she's observing Gavilar and she says, he was a handsome man, unlike his brother. And when I read it, I was like, what did Dalinar do to deserve that? But then Eshonai was a perspective as well, and I forgot that she came up so early in the series. And she was describing the shattered plains, and she said she passed into the shadow of a big lump of rock that she always imagined might have been a city gate. From what little they'd learned from their spies over the years, she knew that the Alethi did not understand. They marched over uneven rock plateaus and saw only rock, never knowing they traversed a city long dead. Reading that line gave me chills. The world building is so subtle and so strong in this series. And obviously I love seeing Kaladin, but I really also enjoyed and loved the development of Adolin. He's actually one of my favorite characters. And in this one he says, I owe you my life, Adolin growled as if it hurt him, talking to Kaladin. That's the only reason I haven't yet thrown you out a window. The gap between them of political position and prejudice is very clear. And I love how that gap closes over a period of time and they build trust. It's probably one of my favorite relationships in the Stormlight Archive. Another one is when Kaladin notices Adolin flicking through a book and he's like, fashion, you're spending the high storm looking for new clothing. And then of course this wouldn't be a video about the Stormlight Archive if I didn't mention the Lupin. And he's like, you have good days, you have bad days, it evens out eventually. And Kaladin's like, you're a strange man, Lupin. I, like many Stormlight fans, love the Lupin and all of his random cousins, I am sure. And while I do love Kaladin, I've realized that if I met him as a person, I would find him incredibly insufferable and I'd probably hate him. So when Dalinar said this, I was like, yeah, I agree. He's so annoying. And Dalinar was like, you have a chip on your shoulder the size of a boulder. He's not wrong. And I said that Adolin was one of my favorite characters, even though he's not like a quote unquote main character, but neither is Patton. And seeing his dialogue just makes me so happy. So when Shallan is researching Uruthru and she's like, historians are a bunch of liars, and Patton chimes in with his sounding satisfied, and Shallan goes, that wasn't a compliment. And then he's like, oh. His little asides throughout the whole series make me cackle so much. And then it wouldn't be a best moments video if I obviously didn't talk about the assassin in white coming for Dalinar and his insane capture of the sword. And in the book it says Seth focuses on Dalinar swinging the shard blade down for the killing blow, and Dalinar did not dodge. Instead, he caught the blade. Shortly after, Kaladin then tackles Seth into the wall, but it's actually the hole in the wall that Seth carved to get into the corridor, so they both go tumbling into open space. They manage to land and Seth then flees after realizing what Kaladin can do, because Kaladin's like, I healed from a shard blade wound. Again, I'm just also noticing Adolin's development because he's practicing sword fighting, and it says a master of the blade learned to do more with the bond. He learned to command it to stay in place after he dropped it, and learned to summon it back if someone else was holding it. He learned that the man and the sword were in some ways one. The weapon was a piece of your soul. He's like the closest person to recognizing that the Spren is, part of him, and in the way that obviously Syl can turn into a shard blade for Kaladin at a moment's notice. And his development alongside the Radiance, it's like he's becoming his own version without bonding a Spren in the same way. And I just love, I guess, the juxtaposition, but his journey is so good. This one obviously also talked about Moash a lot, whom I hate personally. And speaking of juxtapositions, it's Moash versus Kaladin in the sense that Moash is going for revenge, whereas Kaladin is going for protection and justice. And Kaladin really struggles with that across this book. So seeing it discussed in different parts, and especially observed by Syl, was one of my favorite things that was boiling under the surface of this one. Syl said to Kaladin about justice and killing, there's a difference because of what it does to you. Thinking about him, Amaram, changes you. You have to protect, not kill. And then Kaladin's like, you have to kill to protect. You sound just like my father. So his father was onto something. And this whole time Kaladin is taking so long to realize who he is and why and what he wants to do with his life. And I think I would be more frustrated, but I love his journey. But then he's got key moments like with the duel, and Dalinar was like, where is your honor, to all of the high princes after like 4 or 5 of them came for Adolin in the dueling ring. And Kaladin said, honor is dead. If this goes poorly, take care of my men. And then like jumps into the ring. It just makes me think of a movie every single time. And then speaking of Amaram, he gets insulted by Wit, who we know is Hoid. Wit's almost speaking directly to the reader when that happens, and it brought me so much joy. But Dalinar is at the feast and he's wondering why everyone is talking about him, and so he's wandering over to Amaram to ask what he knows, and he overhears the conversation. So Amaram is like, now I've finally met you, Wit, and holds out a hand to, greet Wit. And Wit is like, please, refusing the hand. I wouldn't want it to rub off on me. Whatever you've been using to make your hands look clean, Bright Lord. And I'm like, go off. It's so good. But then no one really takes it into consideration. They just gloss over it. And I'm like, guys, there was a hint right in front of you. Later, at a certain point as well, Amaram, Dalinar and Kaladin are all in each other's presence. And Dalinar says, I believe an apology is in order. And then Kaladin starts to speak because he's getting obviously indignant. And Dalinar's like, not you, son. And that just made me so emotional. Dalinar called him son. Dalinar is really an up and coming favorite character for me, especially in this book, because there was another moment too where he expressed a very rare single Orspren when Shallan showed him her radiant gift. And even though it wasn't cinematic in the way that Kaladin was in the dueling ring, it was still such a key moment for me that stood out as if it was like a frame from a movie. It felt so significant. Another part that made me really quite emotional, and I didn't expect it to on my reread, was when Alokar visits Kaladin, and Alokar is very inebriated, and he's saying to Kaladin, how do you know how to be a hero? Can you teach me? I want you to respect me. All this time in the background, Alokar has been treated like a pariah, away from everyone, because they've tried to elevate him to the position of king, but he hasn't had any experience and he's kind of just, rolled along with it this whole time. But now he's like, I want to take responsibility. I want to be a hero. I want to make change. But who do you ask when you are the king? So him going to Kaladin was him having to swallow his pride and go and ask. And it's the beginning step of his character development that's percolating in the background. And it hit me a lot more strongly than I expected it to, because I actually have a lot of respect for him for doing that. It takes a lot of courage. And then of course we've got Kaladin finally getting with the program and saying his oath. And I hated in the book whenever he thought about going after Amaram, I'm like, you're not Moash, don't follow that path. And it said, if I protect only the people I like, it means that I don't care about doing what is right. And I'm like, finally, if he did that, then he only cared about what was convenient for himself. That wasn't protecting. That was selfishness. And I'm like, Syl has been saying this to you the whole time, and I'm glad you're finally with us. And Kaladin said, I will protect even those I hate so long as it is right. I just can't get over how cool that is. And I love that Kaladin, being a Windrunner, has the most dramatic and action-oriented oaths, because Shallan's oaths are truths to herself because of her order, and Dalinar's not really the same in terms of being a radiant. So it's so cool to see Kaladin every time he makes a new oath. I'm sure I'm part of the majority when I talk about that, but I've only got one or two more quotes to go and then this video is coming to an end. We have of course got Adolin's treacherous thing at the end of this book. Adolin says, my father thinks I'm a better man than he is. Unfortunately for you, he's wrong. Just as he kills Sadeas. Obviously, the first time I read that, I was completely blindsided by the plot twist, but now that I've done a few rereads, I can see that it's Adolin's way of restoring honor to the High Princes and their perception, because if he killed Sadeas, Sadeas is the most treacherous of all of them, obviously, as well as Amaram, but in doing that action, he's approaching his version of honor. So it's almost killing to protect. It's like what Kaladin was trying to reject this whole time, but it's just so cool to look at all the different characters as if they're in their own column and then compare what is similar and what is vastly different about each of them. And I love doing that with Kaladin, Moash and Adolin on all of their separate journeys. I just love it so much. But then finally, my last quote is from Dalinar, and it's when he literally bonds a storm. He bullies the Stormfather into a bond, and he's like, I will unite instead of divide, Stormfather. So Dalinar bonds him, and he says he will not carry the bonds of the other Radiants, he won't have the same abilities, but I think he can still heal, and obviously he can, converse with the Stormfather. And I just love the fact that Dalinar's like, nah, make me a Radiant, bond me to nature. He is a force of nature too, so it checks out. But I obviously loved my reread of this. Let me know if there are any key moments that you would like to talk about about, or themes or character things you've noticed. I love talking about this series. It is one of my favorites. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you in the comments and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.